It was better than Lego. It was better than Lego. It was better than Lego.
Hello and welcome to Better Than Lego, NRL fans' new weekly roundup of the NRL, seeing what's happened over the weekend. Introduced by me, Mike Keating. Also joining me today, Paul Cunliffe, head of NRL fans. Good evening, Paul.
Hello. How are you doing? Okay.
Nice to see you, mate. Okay, we'll talk this week. There's a lot been going on in the NRL generally over the last few months, and we'll have a bit of catch up over some of the issues. But really, to start with the weekend's results, very I won't say lopsided weekend, but we had 5 results that were fairly one-sided and 3 games that were fairly close. This is in line really with one of the problems perhaps that's been coming up with the NRL recently, which has been the blowout results. But before we go on to that, we want to look at there's 2 games that came down to the wire. The Warriors against St. George and the Panthers against the Eels on Friday. 2 belters on Friday evening, both of which went down to the final touch of the ball, which, bearing in mind the sort of conversation that we've had recently over blowouts happening in the NRL and increased winning margins, has to be good for the game, for the viewers. Do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. It's become a bit of a shit show, really, hasn't it? The fact that we're getting too many blowouts, as you don't want to say that word, but it's the way it goes, isn't it? You can't look at it any other way. Anything that's closer than 20 points at the moment is a good game in my book. I've seen far too many of the games that are far too wide when it comes to the amount of points that are being scored, and shit, just shocking. Yeah,
a couple of interesting results I thought in the blowouts were the Bulldogs against Manly, which was a 66-0 thrashing for Manly. Coincidentally, coming pretty much straight after the Bulldogs have been pulled up for breaches of COVID protocols, which we'll talk about a little later, because one of the other teams has obviously fallen foul of that as well. And the other one, the interesting one really to me, which was Canberra 6 and Gold Coast 44. I don't know if you saw that game, but that was sensational. A bit of a Gold Coast fan, obviously, now that Justin Holbrook's
Holbrook there. Well, the Raiders, the fans were walking out, and I don't blame them, to be honest with you. They were shocking, and to be honest with you, it's kind of, the Titans aren't doing that well anyway. They have ups and downs themselves, big time, but to come away with a 44 against 6 away from home, I think it was. So that's a shocker for them, for the Raiders in particular. You expect better from them, and the fans would deserve. I'd never walk away from games myself, but the fans were just absolutely cheesed off, weren't they? Big time, you could tell. And I don't know what's going on at the Raiders, but they should be doing a lot better than that.
Yeah, well, they've fallen down now. I was only looking at the kind of, I don't track the table as much as you used to do these days, because a week's results doesn't really make that much difference usually in the big scheme of things, does it? But looking at where there's a couple of interesting facts came out of the game, that the Raiders, the Titans, that were in 8th when Corey Thompson got injured, and they've pretty much lost every game since. Corey Thompson comes back, 150, 170 odd meters a game. Yeah. Suddenly they start winning a game, which is interesting. And it's not purely down to him, but I think that's an interesting observation. Also, the issue with the Raiders, with what's happened with Bateman last year, and then the issue with Williams this year. Also, there was talk earlier on, I know in Fox League guys were talking about it with Josh Hodgson, and whether Josh Hodgson was proving a barrier to the Raiders game, and rumours of him going to the Broncos, which seems to have settled down a little bit now. But the Raiders obviously seem to be in trouble. They're down to, I think, about 13th now in the table, considering they were serious top 5 contenders. I think that's them gone, really. I can't see them coming back.
Well, since Josh's injury took him out for many, many games, it's been very much up and down for performance, for even from him, but not just from him, but from the whole team. And I think, in my opinion, you've got your 1, your 7, your 9, your 13. Your pivots are key, and if your nine's either not performing or isn't being respected, then we're in big trouble. So I think that's. I don't know a particular thing that he's playing badly, Hodgson, but I think they've just got a breakdown of the the whole structure seems to have broken down.
Yeah, Well, they've obviously lost Nickel Cockstack as well.
Yeah,
the fullback. He's been out for injury as well. No Kotrick, he's gone to the Bulldogs, isn't he? He was another one, 150 metres, the similar sort of.
Absolutely.
You get similar sort of roles that, Makinson that does over here in Super League that people highlight. And makes a big difference there in the NRL. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we get to the winning margins as well. The two big, I suppose there was the Roosters and the Storm on Thursday, which turned out to be a bit of a damn squid with the Roosters struggling. Again, perhaps, an aging squad lacking a bit of a spine, and we'll come back to that. But the Warriors against St. George. I don't know if you managed to see this, but this was absolute belter. Went down to 18-14, last minute of the game. They forced a dropout and then score with no seconds left on the clock in the corner. And of course, to get a kick to the conversion, which he misses, and then you go into a double golden point game, which, bearing in mind, I was having a conversation while I was watching, was watching the Panthers versus the Eels game, because I decided, that was the bigger game, isn't it? So Panthers versus Eels, I thought, I'll put that one on first, and having a conversation during it about how, how the games haven't been quite as tight as they usually are. I mean, we've talked about 5 out of the 8 games this weekend being one-sided. They came to a point where, if they go back a couple of years, the blowouts were always the exception. You'd maybe get 1 or 2. One or 2 around. The rest would be fairly tight. You're talking 1 or 2 scores. And it's kind of flipped a little bit where it's gone the other way around. And we had the Panthers Leeds game, which again went down to the last kick of the game as well.
But if we go back to the Warriors game, for me, the Warriors were heartbroken at the end of that match. Absolutely devastated, And, it's been a real traumatic 2 seasons, essentially 2 seasons for them, with having to essentially live away from family for the best part of last year. And some of this year in particular as well. And, I feel you can't, I don't really support the Warriors in particular, but you feel really, you kind of got a bit of feeling for them to, oh, come on, give them a bit of luck, because they did so much to help the NRL get back on its feet at a time when they needed to. All the teams needed to step up, but they stepped up and beyond what they could have done. And seeing the end product of that match, I was in bits afterwards watching it. I was thinking, oh man, I feel really bad for them. And they're in the dressing sheds, absolutely wrecked. You could see that it was. And they've got nothing to play for, really. They're not going to make the 8 in Australia. There's a possibility they probably still could, but I can't see how. They must be demoralised after that. So so that game in particular, I did see that game. It was a great game, and as you say, a fantastic end to a game.
Yeah, I think I was looking.
Sorry, no, you almost think that it raises a question of, is a draw not really a fairer result? We're not going to go into that subject tonight, but when you get to that point of and it is debatable whether it should just be a draw. But I'm a big believer in the golden point, and essentially, as you just suggested, it was even more important than that.
We Chad Townsend signed it, scheduled to go to the Cowboys next season. Yeah, and with him going back there for his first game back, the Sharks have offloaded him, and his very first kick, it was tackled. It was a fair challenge. There was arguments whether his second foot was off the ground, which. Yeah, it was a touch and go call that, but then he clattered his shoulder on his very first tackle, really. But he's a good signing for them over the rest of the season. But they've got some interesting players coming in next year as well, haven't they? With the likes of the Chiefs coming in. So Brown knows what he's doing, building a squad there. And the suggestion that they may play a few more home games there next year as compensation. I know that was floated earlier in the season. I don't know whether there was any serious consideration about it, but that could stand.
Well, they've done that before. They have done on the road games there, haven't they? So I think a lot of the teams they do understand the effort. It's 4 hours to your nearest match for them. So for the Warriors in particular. So and they have to do that every other week. So they do understand that. I think it's probably even more of a kind of a tale of, I was only reading up about something on that Steve Mascard had put on the internet today about going back to the ARL war, where the Warriors had signed for the ARL, not Super League, and then at the last minute, I think they pitched out and sold out to the chief of the ARL had just said, well, we're never going to see them again because we're never going to let them in the competition again. I'm pretty sure. And there's a good article about the whole Super League war and how the Warriors were treated. Possibly some of it, fair when it comes down to the fact that they split on the last minute. But these days, we don't think of them like that. We think of them as the NRL think of them as an excellent, feeder club of players from New Zealand, which is a fantastic rugby country. And it's a completely different. They're actually looking at another side in New Zealand, which has got its own problems, all over.
Yeah.
But rather than, they could have easily ejected them and we would never have seen them again. And we would have been back to New Zealand coming over for Great Britain series, turning up with a very poor squad and 8,000 in the stadium, 7,000. But these days we're getting, they're coming over and we're getting full houses when they come, things like that. So that's that's back to how the Warriors are perceived. And sometimes you kind of think like that game, 1918, So and they were that's their season probably over now, from that game. That one, when they say it's a game of small bits of pieces.
Yeah.
That's probably the whole season gone on that turn of the.
I think there's still a bit of chance because there's no, apart from once you get out of the top five, top five, maybe six, it's slim pickings in terms of consistency for me. So true. I would never, unless you're going like to the, like the Bulldogs and the Broncos, I think you could definitely rule those teams out. So, and even West are probably struggling to get there now. But those that are hovering around, the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, I think there's a good scrap that will come on there.
Well, I'm going to give you a bit of information here. They're on -159 at the moment, which is
points difference,
yeah, which means that they don't have to just equal those teams in 8th position. They need to get higher with points than those teams. Yeah. So it's a tough ask. Obviously they can do it, but it's a very tough ask.
Okay, well that will lead us into the blowouts because we want to talk about the blowouts really and what's happening in the NRL, the winning margins. A couple of facts. This is, thanks to people. A particular interesting article that was on Forbes from Mike Meehallwood, where he talked in depth and also linked to a few other statisticians that looked at this. This is the highest winning margins since 2004, just over 19 points. In overall, there's a sort of exploration of this sort of anomaly to see how consistent it is. He looked at the results in the New South Wales Cup, Queensland Cup, the Super League, French League, and I can't remember what the other Australian one is. You'll know the name of it. And he looked at the statistics to see what the blowouts were and how they compared across the leagues. Basically, these were leagues that have adapted the same rules, so they have the same rules, sets restarts in operation, that sort of thing. And when he looked at it, he found that there was very little difference really, or they weren't matching what the NRL were coming up. So if I can look at a couple of the stats, so for example, in the NRL, 122 games they've had so far, and he's got 55 blowouts, which runs at 45% of the games being a blowout. Now compared to Super League, which had only had 67 games, 29 of those has been blowout, which runs out at 43%, which I believe isn't that different to, or probably wouldn't be that much different to what it usually is within Super League. The New South Wales Queensland Club figures, 36% and 28% blowout percentage. So again, these are the figures that are not reflecting what's happening with the NRL. And he was positing the suggestion really and this was suggested early on, was that the better teams have adapted quicker, the better of exploiting it. They have the better players to exploit, the situation and the new rules. And this issue about not getting a penalty, or you're not having a penalty restart, so you can perhaps reset your defensive line, seems to be an issue where you're getting a quick restart. And I'll mention this because one of the games that I saw early in the season, we're following Gold Coast quite a lot now, was Gold Coast against Warriors. And I remember watching it and again commenting on this with a friend that Gold Coast were coasting. You know, if you pardon the pun, they were in complete control of the game. Then suddenly the Warriors got a try. Then they got another try, and then they got another try. There was no way. It wasn't. There was no way of Gold Coast stopping it. They just lacked the sort of tools, I suppose, or the experience to perhaps stop that roll. So once the team got on the roll, you know, they couldn't slow the ball down. They couldn't force a penalty kick, allow them to reset. And this was evidenced again, you know, with the Manly when they played weekend right against the Bulldogs, because with Luke Thompson playing, and taking an interest to see what Luke Thompson's doing. At one point, right, Manly went back to back 4 times straight from the kickoff. So they went 3 tries straight from the first set or from the reset. And then the 4th one, they went down the field and it got disallowed with the VAR. Yep. VAR, whatever, bunker from the bunker. However, they scored the next set. So, yeah. But it did kind of emphasize that, you know, once a team that is on a roll, it is very difficult to stop them. And, you know, that's one of the things that's been floated about, you know, with having the 6 again rule, what sort of impacts that had on the teams. And I don't know, what's your thought on? I mean, he talked about teams having. He talks in the article about teams having settled spines, and the ones with the settled spines are the ones at the top of the table.
Yeah. So I think the difference is very much it's something that this kind of rule changes are going to be something that will affect the Premier competition the most, and the Premier teams would be the only ones who will probably gain from it the most.
Yeah.
If you think about time wasting in rugby league, it doesn't happen very often because the whole sport is designed to keep going. You know, ever since we split from rugby, we are the sport that is supposed to be. They call it tag rugby a little bit, you know, because we're supposed to be the sport that keeps everything moving and keeps the enjoyment going. So if you think about the way, you know, players could take a bit of a breather to get, you know, because the fitness might not be as good as the top players in the top teams. So, you know, for example, the 6 again rule now, which takes away the scrum in many respects. Yeah. So there's a time there where they could regroup and get the tactics back in gear, where they've not got time because suddenly we're back in the middle of the park and we're taking the next play. The shot clock, for example, you know, we've got 25 seconds, I think it is, to get this ball out, whereas previously the ball would be gone, you know, into the stands. We need a breather, get the coach, get the water carriers on, let's get all the messages back out, how we, you know, and I think a lot of this comes down to the fact that now they've taken away those opportunities. And when a team gets a roll on, like, you know, the top teams in the NRL at the moment, who you know, where all the best players always are, you're going to get this really might not work as well in Super League because the teams are a little bit closer perhaps, and maybe they've not realised how important it is to get that ball played quicker. You know, don't give the opportunities the opposition a time to have a minute. I think the mental agility perhaps of the teams in Australia to whittle that out of the problem of the whole match, if you like, and say, right, what we're going to do as soon as we get the decision, we're carrying on. And obviously, often it does just carry on. You know, in the Super League, the buzzer just goes and you've got another 6. There's no, you know, you're not stopping at all. There's no kicking the ball out, having another minute.
Yeah.
And I think that they're just. I think what's happening is just those few teams at the moment are just understanding the utilizing the rules better. I think there was a case of it on the last tackle. In Super League, there used to be a rule where you could play after a penalty, I think, and then you could call it back. Do you remember? Yeah. And a few teams suddenly, you know, it was a great rule for a few weeks or a few months, and then a few teams worked out that, you know, every time, we're just going to boot it up the pitch, and whatever happens, and it just became a bit of a farce because, in reality, a penalty should have been given because it literally is the position of the game is supposed to be, even though it's supposed to keep the game going. Yeah, still got to penalise those. That's right. You know, and things were getting forgotten. You know, and he got dropped. You know? And I think that there's what's going to happen is over the next few years that other teams will understand how this works more, and they will they'll counter it somehow. But
sorry.
No, I was going to say the counter might well be a little bit of ungentlemanly behaviour. I've got an injury in the middle of the park.
Yeah.
That's our break. We need a break. We're getting shit on here.
Yeah. Well, players. Well, there's allegations, isn't there, that players are going down at the slightest touch. I know that was mentioned in yesterday's Super League game. So it is possible, and players will take advantage of that if they can. There's, that will happen, but it's not perhaps as prevalent yet.
No, I don't think it would ever become like some other sports we could mention. But I think there are opportunities, and if you're 12 down and under the gun, 16 minutes in, and you can't get a break because you've got no chance to, then I think if suddenly somebody goes down injured, you might think, oh, this is the only way we're going to get out of this. This moment. I think we've a lot of, we've all played rugby. We've all been under the cosh and thought we need to get out of here, but we can't. How can we get out?
Yeah. I mean, that was very much what I thought with the Gold Coast Warriors game, where they just lacked a bit of nous, a bit of experience, that an older head that knew you've got to commit some fouls, so you've got to slow the ball down, you've got to take hits and try and just hold them out. And I think that's perhaps a bit of inexperience, and not just there. I think that's with a lot of with the lower sides, because one of the things we noted with the Broncos and why they're trying to bring new players in next year, they're just missing a bit of experience in the back. There's a lot of youngsters there, a lot of players who aren't as good as well, but it does make a difference. You can see what with likes of Warrie Hargreaves, for example, who's probably one of the best at it. The Roosters, who knows how to control the sort of flow and the momentum in the middle of the park.
Exactly. Yeah, and a few weeks ago, there was a period, and you might have put these two together, but there was a period of high shots. What was it, 14 sin bins in one weekend? And I think a lot of that was, how do we get out of this? We're going to have to cause some penalties to just give us a break. And I think it just got out of hand, and they realised that's not the tactic to get out of this.
Well, that's one of the interesting thing that you mentioned, with the 14 sin bins, because people are going mad about that one weekend, and this weekend's it was three players sin bins. So this belief that players can't adapt. As mentioned in Mike's article, that players have adapted pretty quickly when they're properly incentivized.
Exactly.
When they're not getting banned. So I think that's the interesting thing with this rule. With this, I don't know, and I'm in agreement with him that we perhaps need to see a bigger sample size yet before we make any sort of decision on it. I do think the issue of where you can't offside and kicks to touch, that certainly does seem to be an issue. But on the set restarts, I think what the suggestion is that, for teams that can defend well, giving away an extra 1 or 2 tackles is nothing compared to giving away a 30-yard, kick to touch where they get, further down the pitch, particularly, because in those 2 tackles, you've already got a defensive line set that they can get through anyway. Yeah. So they're not making any yards. So
I'm just going to say that the guests at the NRL will be watching this anyway. This. They might watch this. We don't know. But they'll be watching these problems. And if they think that the game is slipping into essentially a 3-tier setup where you've got teams running away 66-0 and some teams doing well with each other and then other teams right at the bottom, they're going to have to change the rules.
Well, the suggestion is that the results, let me get me stats here. Okay, if you take the top 2 out of the NRL, so the top 2 teams are delivering blowouts, the blowout percentage drops from what is 45% to 36%.
All right.
So which is quite significant. And that 7 of the 10 blowouts have been by 2 teams, which is Penrith and Manly.
Yeah.
So if you take the top 6 out of the NRL, which we know are the strongest teams, then it drops down to 24%. So the suggestion there is that, it's not a suggestion really, is it? But you could infer from that information that it isn't just the rule change that's making the difference here. This suggestion that teams that are better suited and better built, when I mean by better built, I mean teams that put together well, seem to be able to exploit it better. So it has favoured them. And you can look at that, because I've said this over the last couple of years. If you look at all the top teams at the top of the competition, they've all got good halfbacks, settled halfbacks. And as soon as you get out of the top 6, finding good halfbacks is difficult. Yeah. You can see that now with the fact that, if the Cowboys are paying $650K for Chad Townsend to go over there, who's a solid but mid-table probably, halfback. If he's getting that sort of salary, Ash Taylor's on $1 million at Gold Coast, and that he was only, early 20s there. I think he'll do well to get $1 million contract, in his next couple of years as well. So it does kind of, perhaps it does favour those teams a bit higher up. Just in comparison, he does a comparison in his article with the Super League season with Saints with Justin Holbrook, were only 4 out of the 12 teams, had winning records. The NRL today, 6 out of 16.
Wow.
Okay. One of the things that they also mentioned as well is about the increase in points, and the points average had gone up. I think it's the highest for 10 years. Sorry, 27% has been the average over the last 10 years for blowout sort of thing. 30% was post-COVID, so there was a slight increase after that, which is probably to be expected with the turmoil that was going on. But I think it does give that sort of the increase that. What's the other one as well? Sorry, just bear with me a second. The scored more points. I can't find my stats. Now. Well, basically, points are up average 5 points a game based upon what they used to be. 5 points a game isn't that much, but what they're sort of saying is that those 5 points though are actually going to the winning side.
Yeah.
So what's happening is just inflating those scores and inflating those margins that were already there anyway in the first place. So I think this issue though, in terms of settled spines, Wayne Bennett mentioned it, about the clubs that are being run and well run. And to what extent do you think that's playing a part in this?
Yeah, massively. But I think the key to this though is that, I don't think it's an issue where those teams weren't going to win, anyway. It's just the amount they're winning by, and the fact that the spines are, those teams are just, and possibly the coaches as well. There's been so much turmoil in the NRL for coaches and the changes around in Queensland for sure. Massive change around in Queensland. That I think that the Sydney teams and Melbourne, of course, the good teams. They're just out on their own at the moment. Yeah.
I mean, but Bennett mentioned the issue about the managing the salary cap, and just to use that as an example, we talk about with Cronulla, and you've got the point where you've got Fifita, Josh Dugan, and Townsend now, for that matter, who aren't in the team. Fifita's on, I think he was on $1 million, something like that. Dugan's on 950, or supposed to be. Like I say, Chad Townsend moved, he'd shipped off now to the Warriors, but I think Bennett's suggestion was that, well, when you've got teams that have got £1 million or $2 million worth, of talent playing in the reserves or playing, in feeder teams or not playing at all, then, to what extent does the club bear responsibility that for its own recruitment and management processes? And I think, we could pick out a number of teams. Let's use the Bulldogs for an example. It's been an absolute mess the last, 5 or 6 years sort of thing. And certainly mismanagement on the off the field side plays into that.
For sure,
yeah. I mean, with the players that they've had going in and out, the decisions that they've made, players that they've recruited, and that's the same.
Yeah.
When you look at these lower levels, I think that's what was positive for Gold Coast with Holbrook, in the way that they appear to be building, which listening to what the fans were saying, they were very positive about, compared to what had happened in the past with the way the club have been put together and not really been put together as serious title contenders. This sort, it's similar in other sports. For example, I've used the NFL, but some clubs are just happy to exist.
Exactly. Yeah, but the Doggies are, they were, in the last 10 years, they've been one of the top teams, and now they're one of the bottom teams.
Yeah,
things like that don't just happen.
No,
it's almost like, a kind of a misguided way of running a club, if you like, maybe to be nice. It's fair that some of the clubs in the NRL are always cellar dwellers, are always mid-table, but to go from top to bottom in such a short period of time is disgrace, really.
Yeah, it's a 3-4 year process in it. I mean, you would have to look at what happened with Brown when he went to Newcastle. I mean, it took him 3 years just to steady them. Yeah. They were sat on the bottom, winning next to nothing. and he managed to get it to, you know, where I won't say he got them off the bottom, but where they were competing at least to a reasonable degree.
And you know, that's what he is. You know, that's what fans want. They just want to be competitive. They don't want to go down and see, you know, what is it at the moment? A minus 300 for the Bulldogs. Minus 300. Okay, you know, just shocking. That's a shocking statistic for the Bulldogs. So you can't, you know, you can't expect people to turn up and watch that when they've been used to turning up and watching them vying for the top.
Interesting stat that I got from the articles was that the Broncos blowout rate this year, right? It's higher than both the Bulldogs and Lee Centurions.
Really? Yeah.
Despite Lee not actually winning a game,
yeah,
the Broncos blowouts are worse than Lee.
But they've had some very good games. You know, you can't deny that they've just been a walkover this season, even though they've not won. You know, it's not.
They've given some teams a game.
Yeah, it's not been annihilation. And you know, poor Lee. You know, I don't want to go off the bat, but they have no opportunities to bring people over from Australia. For starters, you know, we're talking about Australians. There was almost nothing for them to go and spend, because you have to spend months getting contracts sorted and visas sorted for Australian players to come over. You know, they had November to January to do it, and that was, you know, there was nobody to bring over. So you know, to link them with the NRL, there's a prime example that all the other teams got all the overseas players they needed or wanted. You know, there's a prime example.
Yeah, well, that's the topic that probably needs debate. Well, we know that needs to be debated within the Super League going forward in terms of what you know, what we want the league to look like and the structure of the teams involved, structure and the teams involved. Okay, well, just moving on. The other big story this weekend that broke over the last couple of days was the issue of the St George players going to Paul Vaughan's house to have a big party, which has resulted in a cumulative $305,000, dollar. I have to keep mentioning dollars. Dollar fine for the players. Paul Vaughan himself gaining an 8-match ban after he previously broke COVID protocols before and had been fined £10,000. And perhaps the other notable one as well is Jack de Belin, 4 games back into his return against allegations of sexual assault and on a $750K contract, found to be hiding under the bed when the police arrived, and a few other players, I believe, hiding in the wardrobes, cupboards,
anything. I believe, you know, that's been widely reported in Australia that it was, you know, even the reporters were kind of aghast at this effort. You know, I mean, you know, and that's quite something for Australian reporters with what's been going on in the Australian NRL Rugby League for many years, and they're out of match behaviour is infamous, and they've been trying to crack it down massively, and for this to happen. You know, the situation in Australia is bad at the moment. You know, the lockdown, and you know these players should be setting an example.
I saw Vossi had gone in for them in his radio show on his Sydney morning radio show that he'd gone through. I mean, the issue now with St George, who had kind of been hovering around that, you know, the bottom of the 6, looked like they might have been able to squeeze into it, and I'd put some decent results in against the top teams. Now face the prospect of Vaughan, 8 matches for Vaughan will keep him out till any playoffs. I don't think they can underestimate how important he is to their go forward. And certainly, you know, on the weekend he had another cracking match, certainly in the opening 40, where he's driving. So the impact that he has, and obviously they'll be losing other players now for 1 or 2, 3 games as well. So
the St George position isn't so bad though. You know, they're only on -10, and they're points up on the other teams around them, and you know, they're in 7th, I think, at the moment, and I think the goal difference could see them through to when they get these players back and get back into some kind of form. But I don't, you know, who knows what? Who knows whether they'll cut someone? You know, he'll come back. You know, I'm not sure what the thinking is around.
There's a possibility. I think there's a strong enough case there for certainly some of them that they could end up severing contracts. I know that a few fans have suggested that they want to be turning up the contracts of a couple of them. I don't think there will be some, because some players are more important than others, we've found. But it would be making a mistake. I mean, what Vaughan's done, well.
Well, it's a fair comment, isn't it? That you don't just I've heard this many times speaking to rugby league players. You don't just represent the shirt. You represent the community. You're somebody who kids look up to for the kind of just to take them to a new environment and they're just not acting responsibly.
No.
If they don't have a meeting at least about this situation in that boardroom over the next few days, I'd be very surprised.
Okay, and I suppose, well, unfortunately, they've not got a game this weekend. There's only 4 games this weekend. But before we, I suppose, wrap up, really, the one thing I wanted to talk about, which kind of hasn't really been mentioned, really, is the injury to Nathan Cleary, where he's sidelined for a few weeks and has put off what would have been season-ending shoulder surgery, so that he can come back and play later in the season. Now, one of the things that I have read, and this is an amazing stat, that Cleary and Luai, since coming through, as youngsters and playing together, do you want to have a guess at what the win rate is playing together? Have a guess.
I don't know. I couldn't even think about it. It's very high, though, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, 80% win rate in the games that they've played together. Won several. There's an article that I will send up on my Twitter, which is basically talk about the success of Penrith, and that at various levels players have come through the system. Saints have played. I know Saints have toured down there and played against Cleary when he was young. I think about 14 years of age or something like that, playing in the under-16s. But how it's kind of promoted a culture of winning, where all the players are kind of won at levels that they've come through the gates. So Brian Tottle, I hope I've spelled that right. What's his name? Charlie Kreiter, Charlie Staines, those sorts of players have all won at levels coming through. And Coruscant, who's the hooker who'd won with Souths as well. So although he's the only one who's actually won a grand final, but even though he's coming, he's familiar with the winning culture. And Penrith are the clear favourites, I would say, this year. If Cleary plays, to what extent are they risking their season by going with potentially, not crocked, but he's carried an injury to the shoulder, which will impact the way he plays. Is it worth the risk?
No, never. I don't think it's ever worth the risk. I believe that players should just take the time out and look after themselves, because there's always next year, and obviously it's big season for Penrith. I don't think they've played like this for a long time, really, the way they're playing, probably ever, certainly in my knowledge. But in order to stay fit for the rest of the season, what are the dangers in carrying on playing with that injury? Is there a danger that it could not only get a worse injury, as you just mentioned, and then be out for a year because of it, or even never return?
Yeah.
So I was reading that they said he's not going to be taking. He's been told to go for the surgery, but as said, I'll carry on playing, and the club have accepted it, but only on a match by match basis. Is that okay? I believe that's what I've heard, and I've had problems with my shoulder, and these days my shoulder's like anything that any morning I wake up, it's terrible, So he's got to be very cautious of this, and I just think if he re-injures it, then I think it could easily take him out for 6 or 7 months, and it'd just be he'd be so cheesed off with himself for doing that.
Well, I mean, there is though, because I don't mean it in terms of injury, but to Penrith, because this obviously last season they expected, or they fancied themselves to win the title, and they were clearly the best team in the league. Just it fell apart, against a top Melbourne professional team in the final. So this is their window, as you say, isn't it? This year, next year, the year after. Can they afford to play without Clear? I mean, against Parramatta on Friday, they just don't have the game without Cleary. I mean, his kicking game is clearly the best halfback in the game. His kicking game is the best in the game. There's only Adam Reynolds who comes close, either short kicking or long kicking. Luai, as good as he is, and I love that guy, he's an exciting player to watch. He doesn't have the kicking, certainly not the distance.
Yeah.
And I'll be interested to see how Burton goes, Matt Burton goes, who's bound for Canterbury next year, because the 2 drop goals he put in, although one was wide, they were belters, and so it shows that he's got a kick. I don't know what his kicking game is like. If he can settle in and, perhaps he can carry them. But he was playing in the centres on Friday as well. I think they played with Tyrell May, wasn't it, in the halves. So it does play on the team, because I would imagine if you're that team, you've got a player as good as Cleary, who provides such a key point to them without any struggling, aren't you?
I'm going to make this point to you, right? We've seen it before enough times when a player's been injured, okay, and he plays on. What do his teammates do? The first thing they do is they protect him. Okay.
Yeah.
He's not tackling.
Compensates. Yeah.
He's not taking the ball in. He's never, and for Cleary to be, in that position that Cleary plays, he's got to be up close enough to the defence to make a difference. And if he's worried in any instance of a rugby league player that he's going to do an injury that could put him out for the rest of his career, he's not going to be the player, I don't think, that he is or has been in the past. And, just look after yourself, mate. That's what
Yeah. I mean, so... Go on.
No, I was just going to say that because, we've seen it enough times where if you don't take on the line in that position, or you don't take on the defence in an attacking situation, because, they get hit often in that position. He's not going to go into that situation where somebody's going to kick the ball and he's going to get taken out. He's not going to be in that position. No, they won't allow him to be there. So for me, he's not going to be able to play the same way as he does. Take the time out, get the injury fixed. I understand it's a labrum instability, and he's had is it dislocated of the shoulder or something he's had?
I'm not entirely sure, no.
And I believe it's if you're messing with ligaments in the shoulder, you need to have it sorted, because even just pushing somebody away from a tackle can do that again.
Yeah, particularly the way his sort of game has developed the last couple of years, because a couple of years ago when he first came, well, not first came through, but he'd been in like a couple of years in the game. He was very much I won't say a fly half, but that was the kind of more of the role that he the distributor and organiser and kicker was certainly the last couple of years. Well, I always thought since he worked with Andrew Johns at Origin and he'd come into the Blues to give him some advice, his game just the year after that just went to another level, where he was making the plays and he's making the passes. You can see in the Origin this year where, he's powering through tackles with this superhuman strength that he's suddenly developed, which might be an article for another episode.
But he's not going to be able to do that, all the way through to the end of the season now. So I don't understand this, why he's being allowed to do this. I'm assuming he's overriding the advice. I just don't.
Okay, well, I think that wraps it up. Just a reminder, the game's coming up this weekend. Thursday, Manly against the Raiders. So a chance there for Manly to rattle up another big score. Rabbitohs against the Cowboys. Bulldogs face the thriller against the real test against the Roosters. And then probably the game of the week, which will be the Sharks and Warriors on Sunday. So thanks for tuning in, folks. If you ever want to be a part of Rugby League Radio, please don't feel free to ask any of us to get involved. We're always looking for contributors. Otherwise, have a safe week. Thanks very much.
Cheers, guys. Take care.
It was better than Lego. It was better than Lego. It was better than Lego.